was capable of supporting life. Its own bright spots were not, as one might suspect, those areas that hadn't yet been victimized by meteor bombardments, but rather some of the impact craters the ceaseless celestial storm had left behind. For there, the meteor strikes had conjured mineral-rich underground waters to the arid surface, turning the craters into caldera lakes and the environs into oases of orbiculate flora. Blue-skinned, yellow-eyed bipeds from the far side of the core had been the first to colonize Seleucami, which meant oasis in their tongue. For the world was just that among those they had visited during the long journey from Wuruna. Since then had come hearty groups of Weque, Gran, and Twi'leks in flight from conflicts or in search of hardscrabble isolation, and up to the tasks of farming the colorless ground for moisture and subsisting on tasteless root crops that withered in the midday heat and froze solid at night. Eventually, the planet had given rise to a city and a spaceport, constructed in the shadow of one of the calderas nourished by geothermal energy. Seleucami's more recent immigrants were of a different sort. Young beings from worlds as distant as Gli Anselm and Arcania, dressed in tattered clothing and carrying their possessions on their backs. Drifters and searchers arriving in the battered transports and tramp freighters that served the Outer Rim systems. Male and female, though 3 times the latter to the former, distinguished by what some saw as a restless gaze, and others the look of the lost. At first, the native colonists didn't know what to make of these feckless wanderers, but gradually an entire industry had grown up to cater to their simple, if peculiar needs for shelter, food, and surface transport into the wastelands, where enlightenment awaited, delivered at the outsized hands of a being who was rumored to possess prophetic powers. Among them that day was a Mune wearing a simple hooded robe and well-worn boots. Where normally the mere sight of a Mune might have generated rumors that Seleucami was about to be acquired by the intergalactic banking clan, the youthful horde the Mune had fallen in with barely gave him a second glance. Not when the crowd already included Rin and Fosh and other exotic species, and not when Seleucami itself was viewed as little more than a stepping stone to a greater world. Plagueis had left 114D on Cymirth, and completed the journey by freighter in the hope of maintaining as low a profile as possible. Background data on the Prophet was scant, though Venemus had noted that she had been born in the Inner Rim and had arrived on Seleucami only 3 years earlier. Seleucami's colonists were willing to tolerate her presence, as well as the camp followers she attracted, provided they confined their assemblies to the wastelands. Wedged in among 40 others in an overpacked speeder bus, Plagueis let his gaze sweep across a forlorn landscape of volcanic mountains and the sheer walls of impact craters. In a cloudless sky of pale purple, blinding light flashed intermittently, and the monotony of the 5-hour trip was relieved only by the occasional settlement or lone moisture farm. Journey's End was a relatively small caldera lake, from the shores of which rose a communal sprawl of tents and crude shelters populated by the dreamy veterans of previous assemblies. The Selected, as they were called. Climbing from the speeder bus, Plagueis joined the crowd of newcomers in a short trek to a natural amphitheater, where pieces of meteorite provided seats for some. Others sat on their backpacks or spread out on the uneven ground. Shortly, the sound of whining engines announced the arrival of a caravan of hybridized land speeders, many in pristine condition, though covered with dust and bleached of color by the harsh light. Nearly everyone in the amphitheater stood up, and a wave of anticipation moved through the crowd, building to a fervor as an Iktachi female stepped from one of the vehicles, encircled by disciples dressed as plainly as she was. Plagueis couldn't think of a being more suited to Seleucami or cult status. A hairless biped with downward curving horns and a prominent brow, skin hardened to withstand the violent winds of her homeworld, and a contentious countenance that belied an emotional nature, but most important, possessed of proven precognitive ability. Alone she mounted a slab of stone that was the amphitheater stage, and once the crowd had quieted, began to speak in a solemn voice.
I have seen the coming darkness, and the beings that will visit it upon the galaxy.
She paused briefly to allow her words to be felt.
I have witnessed the collapse of the Republic, and I have beheld the Jedi Order spun into turmoil.
She aimed a finger toward distant mountains.
On the horizon looms a galaxy-spanning war, a conflict between machines of alloy and machines of flesh, and the subsequent death of tens of millions of innocents.
She paced on the slab, almost as if speaking to herself.
I see worlds subjugated and worlds destroyed, and from the chaos, a new order born, buttressed by ferocious weapons the likes of which haven't been seen in more than 1,000 years. A galaxy brought under the yoke of a ruthless despot who serves the forces of entropy. And finally, I have seen that only those hardened by this ineluctable truth can survive.
She scanned the audience.
Only those of you who are willing to turn upon one another and profit by the misfortunes of others.
The crowd sat in stunned silence. Iktotchi were said to surrender some of their precognitive abilities the farther they traveled from their homeworld. But that wasn't always the case. And certainly not, Plagueis told himself, in the case of an Iktotchi who was strong in the Force. It was no wonder that Veneris had been keeping tabs on her.
I have been sent to overturn your most cherished beliefs in a bright future, and to help you wage war on good intentions and the deception of pure ideas, to teach you how to accept the fact that even in the midst of this seemingly blessed era, this wink of the eye in sentient history, our baser instincts hold sway over us. I have been sent to counsel you that the Force itself will become as if it had been but a passing fancy among the self-deceived, an antiquated illusion that will turn to smoke on the cleansing fires of the new age.
She paused once more, and when she spoke next, some of the edge had left her voice.
What this reordered galaxy will need is beings who are fearless to be arrogant, self-serving, and driven to survive at all costs. Here, under my guidance, you will learn to let go of your old selves and find the strength to recast yourselves as beings of pure steel through actions you might never have believed yourselves possible of performing. I am